My 14-year-old daughter spent 3 days making a birthday cake for my wife. She decorated it with best mom ever in her favorite colors. My mother-in-law took one look, dumped it straight into the trash, and said, "No one is going to eat that." My wife just stood there and didn't say a word. Then I stood up and said this. The whole room went silent. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. The kitchen smelled like butter and vanilla, and for a moment, it was enough to make a man forget things. William Holloway stood at the counter with a mug of coffee he had poured 20 minutes ago and not yet touched, watching his 14-year-old daughter work with a concentration that made everything else in the room irrelevant. Cheryl had her tongue pressed to her lower lip. She always did that when she was focusing. She had been doing it since she was 4 years old, since the first time she sat at this same kitchen table and tried to color inside the lines of a picture book. The habit had never gone away, and William had never said anything about it, because he could not think of a single good reason to. The frosting was blue. She had mixed it herself, starting with white and adding color drop by drop until she got the shade she wanted, standing at the counter and tilting the bowl toward the window each time to check it in the natural light. She had done it carefully. The whole afternoon had been careful. She had set the butter out an hour early because he had told her once that room temperature butter behaved better in baking, and she had remembered that fact and applied it without being reminded. She had followed the recipe from her phone with a precision that impressed him even now, reading each step twice, measuring everything level, not guessing. The letters on the cake were uneven. The B leaned slightly. The first E was taller than the second one. The R at the end of ever had a small loop that went too far to the right. Best mom ever. She stepped back from the counter, wiped her hands on the dish towel, looped through the oven handle, and looked at what she had made. Her head tilted a few degrees. She was studying it the way she studied everything, quietly and completely, not looking for compliments but looking to know. "Do you think she'll like it?" she asked. William looked at his daughter, then at the cake, then back at Cheryl, who was still looking at the cake with that careful, hopeful attention she tried hard to keep private, but never quite managed. "I think she should," he said. It was the most honest answer he could give without saying the rest of it, because the rest of it was more complicated. Kendra would love it. He believed that without question. Kendra had always been warm with Cheryl, always wanted the best for her. The problem was not Kendra. The problem came through the door with Kendra. William picked up his coffee. It was cold now, which was his own fault. He drank it anyway and said nothing else. And Cheryl covered the cake with the glass dome they used for pies and went upstairs to change for dinner. And William stood in the butter and vanilla kitchen alone for a moment, in the quiet, and told himself to let the evening unfold before he decided how it would go. He told himself that every time Sharon came over, he had met Kendra 3 years after Diane died. He had not been looking for anyone, which was probably why it had happened. He had been at a charity auction at the Cedar Rapids Art Center because a coworker had mentioned it twice in 1 week, and William had run out of polite ways to decline. Cheryl had been 6. She was staying with his sister that evening, which meant he had arrived at the event unanchored by the responsibility of keeping someone small and bored from embarrassing him, which meant he had actually walked around the room instead of standing in one corner with a glass of something and waiting for a reasonable exit time. Kendra had been near the back wall. She was laughing at something the woman beside her had said, and it was a real laugh, unpolished and full, the kind of laugh that came from someone who had not yet calibrated how to laugh in a room full of strangers. He had turned toward the sound before he had decided to. She was wearing a dark green dress. She had a glass of white wine in her hand, and she was not looking at him at all. They had talked for most of the evening. She asked questions about Cheryl that felt genuine, not reassuring. There was a difference, and William had learned to tell it. The reassuring version sounded like, "Oh, that's wonderful that you're so dedicated." The genuine version sounded like, "What's she like? What does she care about right now?" Kendra had asked the genuine version and had listened to the answers. He had liked her. He had more than liked her by the time the auction ended, and people started drifting toward the exits. They were married 18 months later. Kendra brought her things into the house on Birchwood Lane, and the house changed in ways that were mostly good. Her books were on shelves in places where there had only been bare space. Her cast iron skillet occupied the back burner of the stove and made the best eggs he had ever eaten on a Sunday morning. Her plants were on the windowsills, and some of them actually survived, which was more than William had managed with the plants Diane had kept. Cheryl had watched her for 2 months before she started leaving her bedroom door open when Kendra was home. That was how Cheryl showed trust. Not through words, through doors. William had noticed it and said nothing about it to anyone, just carry the knowledge of it quietly, the way you carry something that matters. He had been grateful. He had believed it was going to be all right. Sharon Whitaker was not a monster. William had spent a long time trying to be clear about that in his own thinking, because calling her a monster would have been both inaccurate and convenient. Monsters were easy. Monsters gave you clean moral territory. Sharon was something harder to name and harder to deal with. She was 63 years old, and she had the posture of someone who had decided early that the world rewarded certainty, and who had spent decades reinforcing that belief by behaving with certainty and watching people defer to it. She was not loud. She did not create the kind of scenes that gave other people permission to push back. She operated below that level. She operated at the level of the small, consistent, quiet thing that no one could quite call out without sounding oversensitive. She picked. It was the right word, and it was the only word. She picked at Cheryl the way some people pick at a loose thread, not yanking, not destroying, just pulling steadily a little at a time, so that the fabric weakened gradually, and you could never point to a single moment when it began to come apart. Cheryl's clothes were wrong. This was communicated through a particular pause before speaking, a particular kind of looking and looking away that said everything without saying anything that could be quoted later. Cheryl's voice was too quiet, or too bright, or too something. The specific complaint shifted depending on which version of Cheryl Sharon had decided was the problem that week. She's too soft, Sharon had told Kendra once, in the kitchen, when she believed William was far enough away not to hear. She needs correction. You let her get away with too much. She's not being raised right. William had been at the sink. He had heard every word. He had walked into the living room, and Sharon had looked at him with the expression of someone who had been interrupted in the middle of something legitimate. I was just telling Kendra, she said. I heard what you were telling Kendra, William said. There had been a pause. Then Sharon had moved on to something else because Sharon always moved on rather than engaging directly. And Kendra had looked at the floor, and William had gone back to the kitchen and stood at the sink until his hand stopped shaking. That had been 2 years ago. The first time he had seen Cheryl cry because of Sharon had been 8 months after the wedding. It had been a small thing, the way the worst things always started as small things. Sharon had arrived for Sunday dinner and within 10 minutes had commented on Cheryl's book being below her reading level, had criticized how she was sitting, and had asked about her homework in a tone that assumed the worst. Cheryl had answered every question correctly. It hadn't mattered. That evening, after Sharon had gone, William had seen the light under Cheryl's door when he passed on his way to bed. He had knocked. She had been sitting on her bed with her knees pulled up and her arms around them, her face red-eyed and composed in the way of someone who had finished crying rather than someone in the middle of it. She had handled it alone, in her room, without coming to him. That was the part that sat in his chest and did not move. She doesn't like me, Cheryl had said. Not dramatically, just as information. It's not about you, William had told her. Then why does it always feel like it is? He had not had a good answer. He had kissed her on the top of her head and told her he loved her, and she had said she loved him too, and he had gone to bed and looked at the ceiling for a long time before he slept. He had talked to Kendra about it. More than once. More than twice. Each time Kendra had listened carefully, agreed that her mother went too far sometimes, and said she would say something. Each time Sharon arrived again, and Kendra folded. Not out of cruelty, not out of indifference to Cheryl, out of something that had been built into her over a lifetime of managing Sharon's moods, a reflex so deep it functioned below the level of intention. Sharon walked into a room, and Kendra's spine disappeared. It was not a choice she seemed to be making. It was something that happened to her. William had understood that. He had been patient with it. He had believed, for 3 years, that patience was the right answer. He had been patient past the point of wisdom. Kendra's birthday was on a Friday in March. The week had been gray and cold, That flat Iowa cold that settled in your joints if you were outside for more than 10 minutes. Inside the house, it was warm. Cheryl had come home from school at 3:30 and gone straight to the kitchen, and William had let her have it, moving his laptop to the living room so she could work without him in her way. He had watched from the doorway sometimes. He couldn't help it. She had looked up a recipe on her phone and printed it at the desk in the living room, which she had not done since she was 12 and still needed the security of paper. She had taped it to the cabinet above the counter so she could read it without holding anything. She had gathered the ingredients methodically, checking them off the list on her phone as she set each one on the counter. She had waited an hour for the butter to soften because the recipe said to, and she had taken that instruction literally. The cake itself had baked in 2 rounds, and she had let them cool completely before she did anything else, resisting whatever impulse might have made her rush, which William suspected had been a real exercise in restraint. The frosting took the longest. She had mixed the color herself, blue into white, and practiced writing the words on parchment paper 4 times before she tried them on the cake. He had found the practice sheets in the trash later and looked at them. The first 2 were unsteady. The third one was better. The fourth looked like what ended up on the cake. 4 tries. 3 words. For a woman whose mother had spent 3 years telling her, by 100 small, quiet methods, that she was not quite right. William folded the parchment practice sheets and put them in the pocket of his flannel shirt. He wasn't sure why. He just didn't want them in the trash. Sharon arrived at 6. She came through the front door with a gust of cold air that she brought in like luggage, something she always traveled with. She handed her coat to Kendra, as if Kendra were a coat-room attendant rather than a daughter. Traffic was terrible on the bypass, she announced, surveying the living room. It smells like sugar in here. Cheryl made a cake, Kendra said. Sharon made a small sound that was not quite a response. Her gaze moved toward the kitchen doorway and back. Are we having cake for dinner? She said. After dinner, William said. Sharon looked at him in the way she sometimes looked at him, which was not hostile exactly, but carried the clear signal that his participation in conversations she was having with her daughter was something she tolerated rather than welcomed. I didn't ask you, she said. In the brief silence that followed, William watched Kendra's face do the thing it always did. The flicker, the slight compression of the lips, and then the pivot, the smooth turn away from the moment before it could become one. Let me take your coat upstairs, Kendra said. William stood where he was for a moment after they left the room. He breathed slowly. He was choosing, in that moment, not to say anything. He had made that choice many times. It had a familiar feel. Dinner was chicken and roasted vegetables and good bread from the bakery on Holbrook Street that Kendra had picked up on her way home from work. Sharon ate with full attention, the attention of someone who takes food seriously and judges it without mercy. The bread was good. The vegetables had too much time, in Sharon's opinion, which she delivered with the authority of a culinary verdict. William ate and said little. He had learned, over the years of these dinners, that the most useful thing he could do was be quiet and present, a counterweight in the room, even if he was not actively speaking. He did not engage Sharon's commentary. He did not laugh at her jokes. He sat at his end of the table and ate and watched and let the evening build at whatever pace it was going to build. Cheryl sat across from Sharon. William watched her from his end of the table. She was being careful in the particular way she had learned to be careful around Sharon, which involved speaking in complete sentences, keeping her posture straight, not reaching across anyone, not leaving food on her plate. She had developed, over 3 years, a kind of armor that was invisible to anyone who didn't know it was there. He knew it was there. At some point, Sharon asked about school. Cheryl talked about her history class, about the Civil War unit they had started. She knew it well and spoke about it easily, dates and names and context coming out of her without effort, because Cheryl actually loved history, and this was a subject where she did not have to perform knowledge she didn't have. Sharon listened with an expression of measured patience. Then she said, "You mispronounced Sherman. It's Sherman, not Sherman." The 2 pronunciations were phonetically identical. Cheryl paused. "I think that's what I said." "It wasn't," Sharon said, and returned to her food, as if the correction had been absorbed and the matter was closed. William set his fork down. He set it down carefully so that it would not make a sound on the plate. He looked at the wall above Sharon's head and breathed slowly through his nose. "More wine, Mom," Kendra said. After dinner, Cheryl disappeared into the kitchen. They could hear the quiet sounds of her moving around, the soft clink of something being lifted, a cabinet opening and closing. Then she came back around the corner. She was carrying the cake on the ceramic stand. She had put a single candle in the center and lit it before she came around the corner, and the small, steady flame lit the white frosting and the blue letters for below. The cake was imperfect in all the ways a homemade cake is imperfect, a little lopsided, the frosting slightly thicker on one side, the letters uneven. She had not come back to fix any of it, because she understood, somehow, that the imperfection was not the point. She was trying to smile. He could see how hard she was working at it, holding the ceramic stand level in both hands, walking carefully, the candle flame bending slightly with her movement. Her eyes were on Kendra. "Happy birthday, Mom," she said. Kendra looked at the cake, then at Cheryl. Her face changed completely. The composed dinner guest face fell away, and something real took its place. Something open and unexpectedly moved. Her lips parted. Her eyes went soft. She was about to speak. Sharon was already moving. She rose from her chair and walked around the end of the table with a calm, purposeful stride, the stride of someone who knows where they are going and expects to arrive without obstruction. She reached out and took the cake stand from Cheryl's hands as she passed. Not roughly, not with any drama. Simply, as if the transfer had been agreed upon in advance. Cheryl's arms remained in the curved position of someone still holding something. Sharon walked into the kitchen. The sound was soft. A small hollow thud, the sound of something ceramic against the interior plastic of a trash can. Then quiet. William stood up. He was at the kitchen doorway in 4 steps, and he looked in and he saw it. The cake in the trash. Sharon standing at the counter, pulling a paper towel from a roll on the wall-mounted holder, wiping her hands with the calm efficiency of someone who has dealt with something that needed dealing with. "No one is going to eat that," she said. Her voice was even, almost pleasant. He looked at her for a moment, the paper towel still in her hand. The trash came behind her. Then he turned and looked back into the dining room. Cheryl was standing in the same spot. She had not moved. Her arms had come down to her sides now, but she was otherwise exactly as she had been. She was looking at the kitchen doorway, at the spot where the cake had been, at nothing. Her face was doing something private and slow. He watched it move through several things, none of which fully surfaced, all of which were visible anyway to anyone who knew her. Then her expression settled into something very still, very controlled, the face of someone who has decided to be somewhere else while remaining in the room. She looked at the floor once. Then she turned and walked toward the stairs. Kendra said her name, quietly, almost more exhale than word. Cheryl didn't stop. Her footsteps went up the stairs. The door at the end of the hall clicked shut. Not a slam, just a click. The kind of sound that comes from someone who is not willing to give the satisfaction of a slam. William stood at the kitchen doorway and listened to the silence from above. He thought about the practice sheets in his pocket. He thought about 4 tries at 3 words. He thought about butter set out an hour early and color mixed drop by drop and a recipe read twice before each step. He turned around. Sharon had come back out of the kitchen. She was moving toward the dining table as if she intended to resume her seat. "Get out," William said. Sharon turned. She turned slowly and completely, a precise rotation that communicated that she was not startled, that she had not been caught off guard, that whatever he had just said was something she was going to consider at her own pace. "What did you just say?" Her voice was controlled. There was something in it that was used to being the end of the conversation, not the middle of it. "Get out of my house," William said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The steadiness of what he felt carried further than volume. Kendra was moving before the words finished, inserting herself between them with both hands slightly raised, the position of someone trying to prevent a physical collision, even though no one was moving toward anyone. "William, stop. Please, just stop." "No," he said. "She's my mother." He looked directly at his wife. "I know who she is. That's not the point right now." "You're overreacting." "No," he said again. He said it the same way twice, flat and certain, with no variation in emphasis, because there was nothing to nuance. He had been overreacting for 3 years, enduring, adjusting, telling himself one more time, giving benefit of doubt to a situation that had long since run out of doubt to give. Sharon tilted her chin up by a fraction. "You're making a scene over a cake." He looked at her. He took his time with it. He had looked at Sharon Whitaker many times over 4 years, and he had always held something back. He was not holding anything back now. "No," he said. "I'm not." He stepped away from the doorway and into the center of the room. It was a calm movement, unhurried, just a repositioning. But Sharon's eyes tracked him, and Kendra's did too, and the room changed slightly. "I've watched you do this for 3 years," he said. The comments, the corrections, the looks, the tone, the little things that you deliver one at a time. So no single one of them seems like enough to say something about. I watched it, and I said things to Kendra about it, and I kept telling myself it would change. It didn't change. And tonight you walked in my kitchen and threw my daughter's birthday cake in the trash." He paused. "And you looked like it was nothing," he said. "You wiped your hands, and you looked like it was nothing." Sharon met his gaze without flinching. "The girl needs to learn that effort isn't the same as accomplishment. She's 14 years old," Williams said. "She spent 2 hours on that cake. She practiced the letters 4 times on paper before she put them on the frosting. She wanted to do something kind for her stepmother's birthday, and you took it out of her hands and put it in the trash." He said it simply, every word clear, nothing elaborated. "That is not a lesson. That is cruelty." The word hung in the room. Kendra made a sound. Not a word, just a sound. Sharon's composure held, but something in it tightened, some small adjustment around the eyes and jaw. "You're being dramatic," she said. "I've known the girl her whole life." "You've known her for 3 years," Williams said. "And in that time you have told her, by every method except direct words, that she is not good enough, that she is too soft, that she is not raised right. My daughter, who has never been anything but kind and patient and willing to try, who has never said a single unkind word to you regardless of what you've said to her." Kendra stepped toward him. Her face was fractured, pulled between the two people in the room, between the life she had built here and the life she had come from. She put her hand on his arm. "William," she said very quietly, "please, I know it was wrong. I know it was. But it's her way. She doesn't always." He looked at her hand on his arm. Then he looked at her. "She cries after your mother leaves," he said. Kendra's hand went still. "Not in front of me," he said. "In her room. By herself. She doesn't come to me with it anymore. She used to in the beginning. She used to knock on my door and tell me what happened, and we'd talk about it. But she stopped. At some point she stopped. He could see in Kendra's face that she was hearing something she had not known. Not something she had refused to know, but something she had genuinely not been told, that had been happening quietly while she was in the house, but not in the right room at the right time. "She asked me what she did wrong," Williams said. Kendra looked like something had fallen through her. "I never have an answer," he said, "because she didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing she could do differently that would fix it. The problem is not Cheryl." Sharon spoke from behind Kendra. "Children are dramatic. They overinterpret. If she's sensitive to small, she's a child," Williams said, turning fully toward Sharon now. He said it with a clarity that cut through everything else in the room. "She's a child in her own home, and you're the adult who came into it. The responsibility is not hers to adjust." Sharon's expression tightened further. She was not accustomed to being spoken to with this kind of direct finality. She had a response ready. He could see it forming, the particular composure that she summoned when she was about to say something that would reframe the entire conversation in her favor. He didn't give her the space for it. "You are not welcome in this house," he said. "Not for dinner. Not to visit. Not to drop something off. You are done here. This is my daughter's home." "It is my home," Williams said. "Kendra lives here. Her name is not on the deed. Mine is." The room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something final has been said and everyone is deciding what it means. Kendra turned back toward him. She was crying now, not heavily but steadily, the kind of crying that happens when something is broken past the place where it can be managed. "You're being unfair," she said softly. The words were quiet, and they were sincere. She believed them. She was not saying them strategically. She genuinely believed that what he was doing was unfair, and he understood that, and it did not move him. He looked at his wife for a long moment. He thought about the woman at the charity auction with a real laugh. He thought about the person who had asked real questions about Cheryl. He thought about the plants on the windowsills and the cast iron skillet, and the Sunday mornings and the way Cheryl had started leaving her bedroom door open. He thought about all of it, and he held it, and he let it be true. And he thought about Cheryl on the stairs. That click of the door. "Then we're done," he said. Kendra's face went through something immediate and total, the kind of change that doesn't have time to be controlled. "What?" "This marriage," he said. "I'm done with it." "William, you don't." She started shaking her head, the small, fast movement of someone trying to push a reality backward. "I do," he said. "Over a cake? You're going to end our marriage over a cake?" "Over 3 years," he said. "The cake is just the last one." She was fully crying now. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. Behind her, Sharon was watching with a face that had gone unreadable, calculating, the face she wore when she was deciding what the right response to a situation was before she committed to it. William walked to the front door. He opened it. The cold came in, sharp and clean, the March cold that carried no smell other than cold itself. He held the door open and waited. Sharon crossed the room without hurrying. She collected her purse from the table by the door with complete composure, the composure of someone who has simply reached the natural end of a visit. She walked through the door without looking at him. William closed it behind her. He stood in the hallway with the sound of Kendra crying in the room behind him and the cold wood of the door against his palm, and he breathed slowly, once, and felt something he had not felt in a long time, which was the absence of the weight he had been carrying. It did not feel like triumph. It did not feel like anything he had a word for. It felt like finally. He turned and went upstairs. He knocked on Cheryl's door. There was a pause. Then, "Come in." She was sitting on the edge of her bed with her back straight and her arms crossed at her stomach, holding herself in the way she did when she was containing something. Her eyes were swollen. She had been crying for a while, quietly, alone, the way she had learned to cry. She looked up at him. "I heard some of it," she said. "I know," he said. He came and sat beside her on the bed. She leaned against him, and he put his arm around her, and she let out a long, slow breath against his shoulder. "Is she gone?" she asked. "She's gone," he said. Cheryl was quiet for a moment. Outside, a car passed on the street. The heating system clicked and hummed somewhere in the wall. "Is she going to come back?" Cheryl asked. "No," he said. She was still for another moment. Then she nodded, a small movement, her forehead against his shoulder. "Okay," she said. William sat with her and looked at her room. The books on the shelf in the order she kept them. The map above her desk with the colored pins in the cities she wanted to visit, Boston and Seattle and New Orleans, and a few in Europe, Paris and Edinburgh, and somewhere in Spain he couldn't read from here. The pile of library books on her nightstand. The things that made up the life of a 14-year-old girl who wanted to travel and loved history and made birthday cakes for people who didn't deserve them. "I should have done this sooner," he said. Cheryl shifted against him. "You did it now," she said. He held her a little tighter, and she let him, and they sat there in her room while the house resettled around them, and the evening outside went fully dark. The weeks that followed were not what anyone in the house would have called easy, but they were honest, and William had decided that honesty was the only environment he was willing to live in anymore. Kendra moved through the house differently after that Friday. She was careful, deliberate, choosing her words and her moments. She made coffee in the mornings and left his cup on the counter without comment. She was gentle with Cheryl, more gentle than she had been in a long time, as though she were suddenly aware of how much effort Cheryl had been spending in her presence and felt the weight of that. She did not bring Sharon up. She was hoping he would change his mind. He understood that. He had expected it. He held no particular hardness toward it. People hoped when they were afraid, and Kendra was afraid, and that was a human thing. He did not fault her for it, but he did not change his mind. He called Patrick Odom on a Wednesday morning from the parking lot of the hardware store because he did not want the conversation in the house, and he did not want it where Cheryl might hear it. Odom was a divorce attorney who had been recommended by a man at William's office, someone who had been through a divorce 4 years ago and had come out of it with his finances intact and his head level. William had noted the name at the time, and written it on the back of a business card that he had put in his desk drawer. He had told himself it was just a precaution. He had not been fully honest with himself about what he was preparing for. He was honest now. He laid the situation out for Odom in plain terms. Odom was a compact, efficient man who asked the right questions and did not editorialize. He took notes. He told William what the process would look like. William listened to all of it and said he wanted to move forward. He drove home. Cheryl was at the kitchen table with her homework. She looked up. "How was your day?" she asked. "Fine," he said. She looked at him for a half-second longer than a casual glance, and then looked back at her work, and he knew she was aware that something had happened, that the day had contained something significant, but she did not press it, and he was grateful for that. His daughter had always known when to give him space. He did not know entirely where she had learned it. He got a glass of water and stood at the counter and drank it slowly and looked at the kitchen, the same table, the same chairs, the same clock above the stove showing a perfectly ordinary hour. He thought about how much he could hold inside a room that looked this normal. He thought about all the things this kitchen had witnessed over the past 3 years, all the dinners and the careful silences and the evenings that started fine and ended difficult. He was glad it was going to be different now. He was glad it was going to be just theirs. Kendra tried, over those weeks, in every way she knew how. She talked to her sister, who called William directly one afternoon from a number he didn't recognize and delivered a speech about giving relationships a chance to heal. He listened to the whole thing politely and said he appreciated her concern and hung up. He did not hold it against her. A woman from Kendra's book club who had been through a divorce and formed strong opinions from the experience told Kendra that most men who made ultimatums did not actually follow through on them and were testing rather than deciding. Kendra relayed this to William one evening at the kitchen table. He listened. "I'm not testing," he said. "How do I know that?" Kendra asked. It was not a confrontational question. It was genuinely searching. "Because I filed papers this afternoon," he said. She looked at him without speaking. Then she looked at the table. Then she looked back up. "I can change," she said. "I know what I've been doing. I know I haven't stood up to her the way I should have. I've never been able to. She's been this way my whole life, and I learned to manage her instead of challenge her, and I know that's not a good thing. I know what it cost you. I know what it cost Cheryl." Her voice was steady with the effort of staying controlled. "But I'm asking you to give me the chance to do it differently. I will tell her she is not welcome here. I will set the limit, and I will keep it." William looked at her. He believed she meant every word of it. "You've said that before," he said. "Not in those words, but close. This time is different." "What makes it different?" She was quiet. The answer she was looking for did not come. "I don't want to lose you," she said finally. "I don't want to lose this." "I know," William said. "I can see that. And I'm sorry, because I do believe you mean it. But what you want now doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change 3 years. I can't unknow those years because you've decided to draw the line today." She pressed her lips together. Her eyes were bright. "You're telling me I had my chance, and I used it wrong," she said. "Yes," he said. "That's exactly what I'm telling you." It was the clearest and most honest thing he had said to her in months. He watched her absorb it. He watched her understand that he was not being cruel. He was being accurate, and she could not argue with accuracy. She got up from the table and went upstairs. He heard her door close. He sat alone in the kitchen and listened to Cheryl's music through the ceiling, faint and steady, some soft song with a slow guitar, and he let himself feel the sadness of the situation because it was real sadness and pretending it wasn't would have been a lie. He had loved Kendra. Endings always cost something even when they were right. He sat until he felt clear again. Then he got up and washed the dishes. They told Cheryl together on a Sunday afternoon. Kendra had asked if they could do it together, and William had agreed because it was the right way to handle it. And because whatever else had broken between them, they owed Cheryl the care of a united front on this particular thing. Cheryl sat at the kitchen table. She had both hands folded on the surface in front of her, a gesture that was very adult, very composed. She listened to all of it without interrupting. When they finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay." Kendra reached across the table and covered Cheryl's hands with her own. "This is not about you," she said. "I want you to know that." "I know," Cheryl said. She looked at Kendra steadily. "I'm glad you came into our family," she said. "I want you to know that too, even with everything. Kendra's composure cracked. She pressed her lips together, and her eyes went bright, and she nodded once, quickly, because she could not speak. "I'm sorry," Kendra said when she could. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you better. I should have said something to her a long time ago. I should have made her treat you right. I know I didn't, and I'm sorry." Cheryl looked at her. She did not say it was okay. She did not offer the easy absolution that would have let everyone off the hook. She just looked and nodded once and said, "Thank you for saying that," which was its own kind of grace. The kind that acknowledged the apology without pretending the damage was undone. The divorce proceedings took 3 months. There was no significant dispute over assets, largely because they had kept their finances fairly separate, both of them having come into the marriage from lives that had already been built once and then broken apart, both of them carrying the caution that came from having lost something before. The house was William's. It had been his before the wedding, and it remained his. Kendra found an apartment across town. She packed her things over 2 weekends, and William was present for both weekends without incident. It was not warm, but it was civil, and civil was enough. Her plants went with her. Her books went with her. The cast-iron skillet went with her because it was hers, and William would not have wanted to keep it. On the morning of the final hearing, William dressed carefully, not formally, but neatly, because the courthouse deserved that much, and drove downtown alone. He parked in the lot on 3rd Street and got a cup of coffee from the machine in the lobby and stood near the window with it while he waited for Odom. The morning was cold and clear. The trees along the edge of the parking lot were bare and geometric against a pale sky. He drank his bad coffee and watched a pigeon work along a window ledge 2 floors above him with the focused energy of a creature that had somewhere to be. Odom arrived at 8:50 and walked him through the morning sequence in the efficient manner William had come to appreciate. Simple, direct, no drama. Kendra was already inside the courtroom when they entered. She was sitting at the opposite table with her attorney, a small, competent woman named Henderson who had been professional in every interaction. Kendra was wearing a gray blazer William had always liked on her. She looked tired in the way of someone who had not been sleeping well for months. She looked at him when he sat down, and he looked at her, and they both nodded. The judge was a methodical man named Harrelson who moved through the paperwork with the brisk authority of someone who had spent years turning complicated human wreckage into clean legal documents and had developed a respect for efficiency in the process. He asked if both parties agreed to the terms. "Yes," William said. "Yes," Kendra said. Harrelson signed the papers and announced the dissolution, and that was that. 3 years and 4 months of marriage, ending in a room that smelled like old carpet and institutional coffee. In the hallway afterward, they stood near the window for a few minutes while their attorneys gathered papers in separate rooms. It was the last time they would have to be in a room together. They both seemed to know that. "I kept thinking you'd change your mind," Kendra said. She was looking at the parking lot. Not at him. "I know you did," he said. "Even walking in here today, I thought." She stopped. She shook her head slightly. "I don't know what I thought. I think you thought I'd decide it wasn't worth it," William said. "That the cost was too high." She looked at him. "Wasn't it?" He thought about Cheryl's room. The map with the pins. The click of the door. "No," he said. "Not even close." Kendra held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked back out the window. "I didn't know how to stand up to her," she said softly. "I don't know that I ever did. She's been like that since I was young. You learn to manage it instead of fight it. You learn to survive it by not resisting it." "I know," William said. "And I believed for a long time that you would figure it out. But I couldn't keep Cheryl in the middle of it while you did." Kendra was quiet. "You just had to try," he said. "That's all it ever would have taken. You didn't have to be perfect at it. You didn't have to win every time. You just had to try, so that Cheryl knew you were on her side." Kendra closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were wet. Henderson appeared from the side room and called her name quietly. Kendra picked up her bag and straightened. She looked at him one final time. "Take care of her," she said. "I will," he said. She walked away. He watched her go down the corridor and through the door at the end, and then the door swung shut and she was gone. Odom appeared beside him. "We're done here," he said. William nodded and they walked out. Kendra moved through her new apartment, trying to feel like it was hers. She arranged the furniture the way she liked it. She set her plants in the south-facing windows where they would get light. She organized her kitchen the way she had always organized kitchens, practical and sensible, everything in reach. She called her sister every evening for the first 2 weeks. She went to work and came home and made dinner and told herself that the quiet was temporary, that she would adjust to it the way people adjusted to things. She had believed, genuinely, that without the tension between Sharon and William, things with her mother would settle. That the conflict had been about William specifically, about his refusal to simply accept how Sharon operated. That now, with just the two of them, it would go back to something manageable. She was wrong. Sharon came to the apartment often, more often than Kendra had anticipated. She had keys for emergencies, and she used them without calling first. She arrived with opinions about the apartment layout, the amount of food in the refrigerator, the neighborhood, Kendra's wardrobe, Kendra's career trajectory, and Kendra's failure to move on from the divorce with the appropriate speed and attitude. Kendra tried, at first, to manage it the way she had always managed it. She nodded. She deflected. She offered tea. But something had changed. Something William had said in that living room 3 months ago had taken root in her. She could not point to which sentence exactly. It was something about the cumulative cost, about what it looked like from the outside, about what Cheryl had felt, alone in her room, crying quietly because she had stopped expecting anyone to notice. She had not stopped thinking about that. The first time she told Sharon to stop, it was small. Sharon was commenting on the way Kendra had arranged her bookcase, and Kendra said, quietly but clearly, "I didn't ask for your opinion on that, Mom." And Sharon had paused and then continued, and Kendra had said it again, and Sharon had looked at her with the particular expression she kept for people who were being inconvenient. "I'm trying to help you," Sharon said. "You're criticizing my bookcase," Kendra said. "That's not help." The conversation had ended there, but something had started. The Saturday in late January, when everything came apart, Kendra came home from the grocery store to find Sharon in her kitchen. She had let herself in with the spare key. She was examining the refrigerator contents with the expression of someone documenting a problem. Kendra set her grocery bags on the counter. "Mom," she said. "You have nothing in here," Sharon said, not turning. "You're not taking care of yourself. You look thinner than you did at Christmas." "I just came from the grocery store." Sharon straightened and turned. She was holding a container of yogurt. "You need to be eating better." "Since that man left, don't," Kendra said. Sharon looked at her, the yogurt still in her hand. "He didn't leave," Kendra said. "I let him go, and I'm not discussing him with you. I only want to help." "You let yourself into my apartment without calling," Kendra said. "You come here without asking. You go through my refrigerator. You comment on everything I own and everything I do, and I've been letting you do all of it my whole life, and I am telling you now that it needs to stop." The words came out more steadily than she had expected. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was not. Sharon set down the yogurt. Her face went through that stillness, the particular stillness before escalation. "I am your mother," she said. The words were heavy with implication, decades of implication. "And this is my home," Kendra said, "and I am asking you to leave." Sharon stared at her for a long moment. Then she spoke. The voice that came out was different from the controlled, quiet voice Sharon usually used. It was louder. It moved through the small apartment with a force that felt designed to overwhelm. She talked about everything Kendra had done wrong, the marriage she had thrown away, the opportunities she had wasted, the ingratitude she had shown toward a mother who had done everything for her, the years of sacrifice that were apparently worth nothing. Kendra stood in her kitchen with her hands at her sides. She did not retreat. She did not go to her room. She stood there and let it come, and when Sharon paused, she said, "Get out of my apartment." Sharon stepped toward her, not physically threatening, but close, pressing with proximity, the physical version of her usual pressure. "I will not be spoken to this way. Get out," Kendra said again. Louder this time. Someone knocked on the door. The neighbor in the unit next door, a retired teacher named Mrs. Okafor, who had a habit of checking on things. "Is everything all right in there?" Mrs. Okafor called. Sharon's voice shifted instantly, composing itself. "Everything is fine," she said toward the door. with the smooth, practiced ease of someone who had been managing impressions for a long time. "It is not fine," Kendra said, clearly enough for the hallway to hear. "Please call the building manager." Sharon's composure cracked. By the time the building manager arrived, and then the two police officers who came through the front entrance of the building, Sharon had moved well past her usual methods. She argued with the building manager about her right to visit her own daughter. She told the first officer, a young woman who was calm and measured, that she had done nothing wrong and that this was a private family matter. When the officer asked her to step outside to speak with her, Sharon refused. When she was told she needed to calm down, she raised her voice further, loud enough now that other residents had opened their doors. When she grabbed the officer's arm and shoved her, the officer's partner moved. It was fast. It was quiet in the way that official things are quiet, efficient rather than gentle. Sharon was arrested. Kendra watched from the doorway of her apartment, both hands over her mouth. She sat on a bench outside the building in the January dark after the police cars had gone. The cold settled into her through her coat, and she did not move to go inside. The world looked very clear and very quiet. She thought about all the things that had led to this bench on this night. The cake in the trash. 3 years of small, quiet erosion of a 14-year-old girl. The way Cheryl had turned and walked upstairs with her arms still curved. The way William had stood in the living room and said enough and meant it, fully and without ambiguity, in a way she had never seen anyone do with her mother. She thought about why she had never done that. She had managed instead. She had been managing since she was a child. You learn to read Sharon's moods and adjust to them, to see the storm forming and steer around it, to give way in small things to prevent larger eruptions. You learn to call it peacekeeping. It was not peacekeeping. She saw that clearly now, sitting on the bench in the cold. Peacekeeping assumed two parties with equal responsibility for the conflict. What she had been doing all her life was something else. She had been absorbing. She had been a shock absorber for everyone in her mother's orbit, including, eventually, a child who had done nothing to deserve it. She took out her phone. She looked at William's name for a long time. She pressed call. It rang 4 times. Then voicemail. His voice, brief and everyday, saying to leave a message. She held the phone against her ear after the beep and said nothing. Then she ended the call and sat in the cold with the phone in her hand and understood, in a way she had not fully understood before tonight, that there was no version of this where William picked up, not because he was a cruel person, but because the call was too late and he knew it, and he had moved on, and what she was sitting with now was entirely hers to carry. Some clarity comes on time and saves you. Some clarity comes late and just makes you understand what happened. She sat on the bench and let herself have both kinds. On a Saturday in April, 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, the kitchen on Birchwood Lane smelled like vanilla again. This time it was different. Cheryl had set the bag of flour too close to the edge of the counter and bumped it with her elbow while reaching for the measuring cup. It hit the floor and sent up a white cloud that settled over the tiles and both of their shoes and the lower half of the cabinet doors. Cheryl looked at the flour on the floor. Then she looked at William. He looked back at her. She started laughing. It was unguarded and genuine, the kind of laugh that comes before you decide whether something is funny, the kind that just happens. He felt it land in his chest and knock something loose that had been sitting there for a while. "That's going to take forever," she said. "Enormous amount of cleanup," he agreed. She picked up the bag from the floor. There was still enough. She set it on the counter, away from the edge this time, and they started again. They were making a yellow cake with cream cheese frosting. Cheryl had found the recipe herself and printed it, which she had taped to the cabinet above the counter so both hands stayed free. She had written a grocery list, and they had gone to the store that morning together, moving through the aisles with the comfortable efficiency of two people who had been grocery shopping together for years. She had put things in the cart without consulting him unless she had a genuine question. She knew what they needed. Now she measured the flour into the bowl carefully, leveling it off with the back of a butter knife the way the recipe specified. "Does a cake have to be for something?" she asked. "What do you mean? Like a birthday? Does there have to be a reason?" "You can absolutely make a cake for no reason at all," William said. She nodded, satisfied. "That's what I figured," she said, and went back to her measuring. The afternoon light came through the window at a low, warm angle. April light in Iowa had a particular quality, something gold and patient, like it was taking its time on the way out after a long winter. It fell across the counter, and the flour cloud that still drifted near the floor and the parchment paper Cheryl had laid out on the cutting board. William cracked the eggs for her, and she stirred them in one at a time while he held the bowl. The recipe had a specific instruction about adding them slowly, and she was following it exactly, taking her time, watching the batter absorb each egg before she added the next. It was good work. It had a rhythm to it. He thought about Sharon, briefly, the way you think about a storm once the sky has cleared. She had been what she was. She had operated the way she had always operated, and she had gone on operating that way until the world outside her daughter's management had finally pushed back in a way she could not contain or redirect. That was the thing about people like Sharon. They functioned in the space other people cleared for them. Take away the space, and there was nothing supporting the behavior. He thought about Kendra with something that was not bitterness and not grief, but something quieter. A recognition. She had loved Cheryl, he was sure of that. She had simply not been capable, yet, of choosing Cheryl over the habit of surviving her mother. He hoped she was doing the work of understanding that now. He hoped the clarity had come in time to be useful to her. But that was hers. He was here. The batter came together smooth and yellow and smelling like every good cake he had ever tasted. They poured it into the 2 round pans Cheryl had greased and prepared earlier, and she put them in the oven herself and set the timer with the confidence of someone who has decided they know how this goes. While the cake baked, they cleaned the flour from the floor and the lower cabinets and the fronts of their shoes, which was genuinely extensive work that took most of the baking time. Cheryl swept, and William wiped down surfaces, and Cheryl's music played on the small speaker on the windowsill, something older with a guitar that moved slowly and filled the kitchen without taking it over. "You know what I've been thinking about?" Cheryl said, pushing the last of the flour into the dustpan. "What?" "I want to study abroad," she said. "When I'm older, like junior year of college. Go live somewhere else for a semester." "Where?" he asked. She emptied the dustpan into the trash. "I don't know yet. Edinburgh, maybe, or somewhere in Spain. I've been reading about the programs." He looked at her, 14 years old, already reading about study abroad programs, already thinking about the version of herself that would be 20 and ready to go somewhere with a suitcase and a plan. The girl with the map above her desk and the pins in the cities. "I think you'd be good at that," he said. She looked up at him. "Really? Really?" he said. "I think you'd land anywhere and be fine." She considered this, the serious way she considered things. Then she nodded once, the small movement of someone filing useful information. The timer went off, and she pulled the pans from the oven with the mitts and set them on the cooling rack and pressed the center of one lightly to test it, the way the recipe said, and declared them done with calm authority. They let the layers cool while they made the frosting. Cheryl wanted to do this part herself, which was fine with William. So he stood back and watched her measure cream cheese and powdered sugar and butter with the same level focus she had brought to the rest of the afternoon. She used the hand mixer, and it ran loud for a few minutes, and when she turned it off and lifted the beater, it left a thick, smooth peak that curled perfectly. "Taste it," she said, offering him the spatula. He tasted it. "That's really good," he said. She looked pleased and tried not to show it, which he found completely endearing. The assembly took a while, and she gave it her full attention. She spread the frosting between the layers, then set the top layer on with care, then applied the outside frosting in slow, deliberate strokes. She used the edge of the spatula to smooth the sides, working her way around with patience. It was not perfectly smooth. The frosting had some texture to it, some variation, the kind of honest imperfection that shows you the work. She stepped back. "Well," she said. William looked at the cake. It leaned slightly. The frosting was thicker on the left side than the right. The edge where the 2 layers met was visible in one spot. It looked like a cake that someone had made in a kitchen on a Saturday afternoon for no reason except that they had wanted to. "It's perfect," he said. Cheryl laughed. The same laugh as the flower, open and unguarded, bouncing off the tile and the window and the walls. He laughed too. They sat at the kitchen table and ate 2 slices each, which was one too many. And Cheryl talked about the book she was reading, a historical novel set during the Second World War, and she explained the plot in a thorough and enthusiastic way. She explained things she cared about, going back and filling in details she had skipped over, correcting herself when she got ahead of the story. He listened to all of it. He asked questions when he had them. She answered with the pleasure of someone who has found the right audience. The April light moved across the table as the sun went down, that gold patient light going amber, going pink at the edges of the sky outside the window. The cake sat between them on the ceramic stand, half-eaten. The table had flour on it still, in the corner nearest the counter, a small white ghost of the afternoon. "You're not mad anymore, right?" Cheryl asked. She asked it conversationally, eyes on the last of her cake, not looking at him directly, which meant the question was genuine and she was giving him room to answer honestly. William was quiet for a moment. "I'm not mad," he said. She looked up then. He met her eyes. "Mad would mean I'm still carrying it." "I'm not carrying it." I put it down. She held his gaze. Checking. She had always been good at checking, at seeing past the surface of what he said to whether he actually meant it. He meant it. She could see that, and she nodded, a small movement, and looked back at her plate. "Good," she said. Across town, in a quiet apartment, Kendra sat at her table after dinner with a mug of tea and a silence that had become, in the past few weeks, less oppressive and more honest. She had started seeing a therapist named Dr. Foster, a woman who asked precise questions and waited fully for the answers without filling the space herself. Kendra had been surprised in the first sessions to find how much she had to say once someone simply waited for her to say it. She had been talking over herself for years, moving past things before she had finished understanding them. She was going slower now. She thought about Cheryl sometimes, not often enough to be useful, but enough to be honest with herself. She thought about what it had meant for a 14-year-old to keep trying, to keep making the gesture, to keep showing up with something handmade and hopeful in the face of steady discouragement. She thought about what that said about Cheryl's character and about her own failure to protect it. She was carrying that. She did not think she should stop carrying it. She thought she should carry it until she understood it fully, and then carry what she had learned somewhere useful. Her mother's court date was in 6 weeks. Sharon had hired an attorney. Kendra had not been involved in that process and did not intend to be. She had declined to provide a statement. The officer Sharon had shoved was fine, a minor matter physically, but the charge was real and would have real consequences. Kendra did not feel satisfaction about that. She felt something more complicated, something close to grief, for the version of her mother she had always hoped would eventually appear, the one who was capable of just being kind, just for a moment, just enough. That version had never come. Kendra was working on accepting that it never would. William Holloway did not look back. That was not a posture of bitterness. It was not the posture of someone trying to be hard. It was the posture of a man who had made a clear decision from a clear place and had found, on the other side of it, exactly what he had chosen it for. His daughter was fine, not performing fine, not carefully, quietly surviving. Actually fine, the real kind, the kind that showed up in the way she moved through the house now, without the careful monitoring of exits, without the measured presence of someone waiting for something to go wrong. She was comfortable. She was herself. She left her bedroom door open all the time now. That old signal, that old proof. He noticed it every time. The kitchen was theirs again in the full sense of the word. It was a place where things got made and flour ended up on the floor, and the music ran a little loud, and someone burned a first batch of something, and they tried again, and it came out right. It was a working kitchen in a working house with a working life inside it. William cleared the plates from the table and rinsed them at the sink. Cheryl wrapped the leftover cake in plastic wrap and found a spot for it on the refrigerator shelf and stood back to make sure it fit. "Same time next week?" she said. He raised an eyebrow. "We're doing this weekly now." "I'm thinking monthly," she said, "with occasional exceptions." "That seems reasonable," he said. She grinned at him. It was an easy grin, unguarded, the kind of expression a kid wore when nothing in the room required her to be anything other than herself. He dried his hands on the dish towel, and they moved around each other in the small kitchen, putting things away and turning off the lights, And outside the window, the April sky was doing the last of what April skies did in Iowa. The long pink gold going gray, going dark, patient and ordinary and beautiful in the way that ordinary things are beautiful when you have learned to stop taking them for granted. He had chosen this. His daughter, in her own home, easy and real. Everything else had become clear after that. The house on Birchwood Lane settled into evening around them, quiet and warm and fully theirs. And that was enough. That was everything.